And I'm going to do another review on these particular two watches, which I'll call the Aging Dynamic Duos. These are early 70s vintage pieces. The one on the left is a Rolex Datejust 1601, which is referred to as also the pie pan dial because of the way the dial kind of recesses at the edges and drops down like a pie pan. Really cool of that generation. Had a pretty long run. And on the right is a Rolex 1675 Pepsi dating to 1970. The Datejust on the left is 72. According to the serial numbers, again, the references for the serial numbers vary almost a year off in between, depending on which reference you use. So we'll talk about these a little bit because maybe it'll help some shoppers when they're looking for vintage pieces. Both of these are not 100% original. The one on the right, the GMT Master dating from 1970, has a Rolex service dial and hands had installed in its recent past by the previous owner. I received the original tritium dial and hands with the purchase, although they do need some cleaning up because they have tritium scattering all over the dial, probably from just time. He did it in about 2014 or 15, I think it was. So from it traveled from 1970 to 2014. What is that? 44 years. 2014, somewhere around there. And the tritium eventually was, as it's decaying, kind of flaking off. It was sticking on the dial, so it kind of looks pretty ratty. It seems like back maybe 10 years ago, it was the norm to take these vintage pieces because they weren't really commanding high dollars, and they were basically commanding, they weren't. They were commanding maybe in the fours and fives. So when I bought this one, a really good example. Again, I bought this in 2015, around that time, 2014. A good example with the original dial and hands was going for around 5,500 to 6. I picked this up for 4,000, and that included the dial and hands in a separate container that the watchmaker he had locally do. He placed them in like a wax paper. He stored them correctly so that nothing stick to the face. So I can always do it. The problem is with the one on the right also is that it has the 24-hour hand. The red paint, the original hand is missing. So it's silver. That needs to be if you're going to redo the hand, you'd have to repaint the hand. A watchmaker would, and also try to. And I got a really interesting idea for a restoration on that, which gets kind of touchy. But somebody suggested to fill the vacancy, the partial vacancy of the 24-hour hand to make it, this. Of course, these you're looking at right now are the service dial and hands. But I'll probably include a picture at the end of this video of the watch with the original dial and hands, and you can pretty much see why, maybe during that time, he installed the service dial and hands, but he didn't toss the originals, which was smart because that's what I got with the deal. One person on the watchmaker forums suggested taking tritium from 70's alarm clocks, and I thought that was a great idea actually, because if you could reliquify it, maybe just knock off the tritium off another hand, reliquify it, and then reapply it to fill in the hole on the original, hand. That would kind of rectify that problem. The other problem is trying to sort out the color. Here's a service replacement hand, which is red. So, you could try to match that color of the original 1970 hand, which, I don't know if it was the same. It was probably close from what I can tell with pictures, but of course, they're, it's going to look new if you apply it like that, which, you want to try to be honest with these. Now, of course, this would be for me because I don't plan on selling this watch. I'm not going to try to pass up, but the question is, how would the next owner feel? Would that owner, now that these watches are creasing and have increased so dramatically in value, they're going to want everything original. Well, some of these pieces are going to have light restoration on them, so I think that's minimal that you could get away with without being overkill. Just touching up the hand, cleaning up the dial with some Roydico putty, pulling off whatever you can, just clean it up, making it look more presentable. without touching the aged loom, the darkening of the loom. So, the bracelet on this, I believe, was an oyster bracelet, and it looked like it was changed out. It's got the Rolex Swiss folded 6251H bracelet. It's and this one's not dated. Contrary to some opinions out there in the forums, the vintage forums, anything from latest 73 to 75 will not have a date stamp. Prior to that, it had a date stamp. Like the one on the left would have. It actually has a date stamp of 1963, and I'll get into that a bit because that's not the correct bracelet to this watch head dating to 1972, the actual case. So those are some of the issues that arise when you're trying to look for vintage pieces that are genuine and authentic and untouched. Some of these pieces you're going to run into don't have the original bracelet. They have odd code date stamps and just things. Worse yet is with the service dial and hands, which is on the GMT here. Although they are useful, I mean, I can wear this to bed, which I have done, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, this is just as legible and readable as a SKX007 Seiko. So I mean, if you probably can't catch it on a camera, but the thickness of the painted indices are pretty thick, super luminova paint. So it holds its lumen, it's bright. So there's an advantage. I mean, the other thing is I'll bet you what caused the hand on the GMT to lose some of its tritium is, people wore these things, and the tritium, as it aged, got more fragile and dried up. And, just a bump of a wrist could knock half the tritium off a hand or dislodge it. Now, I'm wondering if that's what happened. So it is what it is. Right now it's sitting with the service dial in hands. He actually sourced out. This was, like I said, about 2014, 2015, he did this, and he was able to source it out, which was less of an issue than now. It's impossible, probably, unless you're buying from eBay. And if you got a seller somewhere that's letting a set go, and for whatever reason. So, the hold on one second. I got to let my dog in. Okay, I'm back here to let the poochie in. So yeah, that's I want to go over some of the pitfalls you run into when you're shopping vintage. Like I said, the GMT, they were going at the time. I mean, the prices shot up dramatically after 2016, 2017. But at the time, they really good all original example was going close to 6, maybe a little bit over. And I picked this up for 4 because of that. And I wasn't going to do it, but of course, he did have the original dial in hands he kept, and I got. The one on the left is a 1601. You can look at prices now. I still think this was the icon watch back in the 80s when I was growing up. It was to own a Rolex Datejust. I think maybe two tones. Gold, silver, stainless steel, was a little bit more popular. But owning a Datejust, I don't know why. It seemed like maybe the sports models during the 80s weren't as probably as popular as these, as the date or the Air King and the Datejust was. Even the Day-Date, of course, that was really out of touch for most people because of the materials that it used, gold or platinum. This is a Pipan one now, 1601, dating to 1972. It's got a Jubilee, a 6251H Jubilee, which is period correct. A 62510H Jubilee would be the newer style that's solid on the ends. These are the folded link Jubilees. And I'll show you this one here. Let me get this out of the way. We'll cover this one first. So if you look at this clasp, this is the big logo clasp. I believe in the mid to late 60s, this one was phased out. I was just looking at the references now, but it escapes me. And it was replaced with the more normal style without the big logo. And I don't know if you can capture this, but again, remember the head's dated in 1972. And the watch back, the case, when you take the case off, the watch back case, 72, and let me see if I can find the stamping. You probably won't be able to pick it up on the camera. Here, let me look. Oh, yeah, okay, here we go. I don't know if you can read it, but that says, from what I can tell, 3 of 1963. Let me check it again. Yep, 3 of 63. So it has been said on the vintage forums that some of these bracelets may have sat in stock for a while, and then they fitted into newer models prior to, sale. I don't know that something like that. I don't buy that. I don't think any customer is going to want to buy this watch in 1972, thinking they're getting a brand new watch, would see it on a 1963 dated bracelet. Back then, of course, these kind of mundane details were not so involved. But now, as collectors, and you're paying big bucks for these watches. I mean, you're talking a watch here is probably $150, $130 new, maybe $200 in 1972. And I mean, now you're talking maybe close to $4,000 for a stainless steel with the 18 karat gold fluted bezel. And I'm not sure if that's 14 or 18 karat. I'd have to double check that. But the drilled lugs, the smaller drilled lugs. But now you'll notice also both of these pieces right here, I'm not wearing every day, and I don't believe in a watch winder. So of course you'll see the dates are way off, and that's because these are not the quick sets. You have let me back up. They're both running 1570 caliber movements. These are the 1570 calibers from what the 553 ran for a period, and a 1680 Submariner ran. This movement, like a lot of the Rolex movements, found its way in a multitude of models, all the range, from sport to the normal dress watches, like the Datejust is kind of considered maybe a sport dress watch. So the difference is, though, is even though this one on the GMT is stamped 1570, it's actually caliber 1575, and the 5 designates the GMT master caliber movement. If you notice, there are two between the 2 and the 5. You'll see a stutter on the seconds hand, and it happens pretty much every time it goes around. That is common with these calibers, these 1570. If you take off the winding train off the back of the movement, there's a little like a brass spring, and what it is a tension spring, and it basically needs to be kind of bent a certain way to put just enough pressure to avoid that jumpiness of that seconds hand. It's not I can do it. It's I just haven't cracked it open to do it. It's keeping still excellent time. It just looks like it wouldn't keep time. There, it's going to go again. It's going to stutter. It starts stuttering around between 2 and 5. So yeah, that's just part of this caliber. If that tension spring is not set correctly on the seconds hand, it will do that. Just in case if you ever see one that's doing it, it's not a big deal. Matter of fact, he had it serviced. I think it's done that ever since. Again, it's keeping good time, but he had it serviced at a place in Downers Grove, Illinois, a local jeweler, and I'll bet you he didn't, set that spring's tension up correctly, and that's why it's doing it. But anyways, it's not a big deal. So yeah, that's the things about when you shop vintage. They're really high dollar now. You're paying more for vintage pieces, a lot of these vintage pieces, than you are paying for some of the the newest Rolexes, unless you're going gray market and you're getting kind of screwed with exorbitant high markups. Gray market has, but the new 2020 release Submariner is $9,300 retail. You won't find it for that, but these GMTs are well over that. Now this one, if I did sell it with the service down hands, that probably knocks about $4,000 off the price easily, $4,000 to $5,000. I've seen examples like this, sell for $13,000, $14,000, and even more with box and papers and all that. But you're probably looking more like closer to $9,000 for a GMT with service dial in hands. I mean, the original Rolex parts. It's just not something you want to do with a vintage piece. So But, if you get it for a sweet deal and, the money justifies it, and if you're lucky enough to find somebody who did the idiotic change out like he shouldn't have, instead of sending it to a restoration specialist, maybe, instead of a local watchmaker, at least if they have the original hands and dial, you can put back or at least work with, because you have that option. But yeah, you can see that stutter on that GMT. So that's that tension spring that needs to be adjusted. Again, both 1570 calibers, although in a catalog, if you were to look at the details of the specifications, the GMT is a 1575, which just is the 1570 of the Datejust movement with the 24-hour GMT function, so they designated a 5. The older version, 60s version of the 1675 was called the 1560, would be in the GMT, and 1560 in the Datejust, and the 1565. And I believe that was 18,000 beats per minute, beats per hour, I'm sorry. And these are a little bit, the beats rate were different. I don't have the specs in front of me, but I think the difference between a 1570 and a 1560 and 65 and 75 were the beats per hour a little bit different too. Also, again, these don't have quickset features, so both these dates are off. And if you don't wear them for a long time, which I don't, you pull them out of the your safe or your safety deposit box at the bank or whatever, and you go to wear it for a week or a couple weeks. You're going to have issues because you're going to have to sit there and keep spinning it around and around and around to set the date. So I just pulled these out to do a review. So I just wound them and set the time. So that's the other part of vintage pieces is no quick set. So if you don't wear them every day and you don't put them in an auto winder, you're going to have a time, spend some time rotating that hands to set the date, which, that's a 24th. So guess how many times I got to rotate it to today's date, which is the 20th of September. So anyway, so this is not the original bracelet, but that's fine because it would be a 6251H. Just the wrong date stamping, the wrong type of clasp. This is the clasp it should have. And this stuff gets debated on the forums back and forth, but everyone I've seen on HQ Milton reference points of the 72 serial numbers, they have this clasp. Earlier model 69 could have that clasp, though, the big logo, but both 6251H bracelets, they're both Swiss made. I also collect bracelets. I don't know if I mentioned that. I collect the Jubilees and the Oysters when I can find them cheap. Well, back maybe 10 years ago, they were pretty reasonable, $200, $300, $200 for a really nice one. The Jubilees were even cheaper at times. You find them for $150 almost all day, $125, $150. Of course, you can't do that anymore. They're much more pricier, but these are the Swiss folded ones. There is one made in America that is more like an oval link. And then there's one made in Mexico. The other interesting point about it is there was two, these have 55 end links on them. There are two styles of 55 end links. If you look at the slots, let me see if my camera will adjust. You see these little slots, how there's like 4 of them? Let me take this up. If you look at these are predating to before 1965 when you see those 4 slots at the end, 1, 2, 3, 4. The newer 55 styles past 1965 through the mid 70s before they changed them to the 555s. Those 55s had only 2 slots. So that's a notable difference too. So if you see 4 slots on the 55 end links, you're 65 and older, 1965 and older production. So that matches. This doesn't match this bracelet because, and this happens a lot with these vintage models, because this bracelet does not have a date stamp code on it. And that would date it between the last quarter of 1973 and through 1975. And I believe in 1976, they started the letter date codes, like the V's and the current ones we're using now. They're using the double letter codes. But in the 70s, when they picked it up back again, stamping the dates on these bracelet clasps, they switched from the actual dates, like 3 of 63 or whatever would be the date, to like V or single, and then it changed into double letters for the date codes. So, but it is common to see no date stamp code at all between the last quarter of 1973 through 1975. Beginning in 1976, they picked up with you would see, I think V is 1978. I forget what 76 is, but around 76, they picked up the date stamping. So there's a little note if you're collecting or trying to locate a Jubilee for your existing vintage piece. But have been thinking of, as of late, to bring back the original dial. It needs a little work, like I said, and the hand needs work. So I might be taking on that project. But I don't plan on selling it, so I don't really care. And, picking it up for about $2,000 less than what the average was going for was too tempting. And beyond that, beyond the price at the time, it was more so the fact that I didn't feel comfortable. This was an eBay transaction. And this guy was in locally. He was local, and I was able to set up a time and meet him at a Starbucks of all places, which was close to my work on a Sunday. And so I met with him. We sat, had some coffee. He gave me a lot of information about it, told me why he did that. He showed me some pictures and stuff of why he did it. And I, of course, I didn't say anything. I would have never. I would have sent, if you don't know how to do it, send it off to a specialist that can handle it. And there were specialists then too. But as these get older, people are not touching them. But back in the mid 2000s to maybe the 2015, you've seen a lot of them wanting to bring the lume back, and it was more common to do that and put in super luminova Rolex service dials. Sadly, a lot of them are lost. Like I said, I was really lucky to get the original dial in hands with the deal. So, yep, just wanted to give you a bit of information, possible pitfalls. Some people don't care about this stuff. I think a lot of people are mixed on like a GMT 1675. A lot of people would pass up on a service dial in hand purchase. There are some people that specifically seek out these vintage pieces with service dial in hands because they like the old and new. It's almost like a resto mod of like a Porsche 911 with updates on it. The case, the movement, even I believe the insert is the original insert to the watch. It's definitely an old one. It's not a new one. Just by looking at the font and a little bit of the differences, I'm pretty sure that it's either the original or maybe the second one replaced early on. So most of the vintage is there. The bracelet and everything is vintage. However, the dial and hands, which are the most important part of a vintage piece, again, it's such a controversy. Some people would never do it, but there are people that seek out these vintage models with those, Swiss or super luminova service dial in hands, which I find kind of interesting that there is a kind of a following for that also. So, yeah. To each his own, and the one more note too is when I was looking for this, I ran across a lot of these with service dials, and pre-super luminova service dial in hands, there was ones that were just the luminova, they were called, and ironically they said the same Swiss equals less than 25 on it, but you could take a flashlight to it and they would glow all night. And those were the previous version of the service dial. So you got to be careful. If you think you're buying a 1675 and it's got a pure white like this appearance where it looks new but it says Swiss less than 25, that still could be and I don't know why Rolex did that, but that still could be a luminova service dial in hands. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the originals. This is 1970, so if you have Swiss, a tritium dial and handset, less than 25 on the bottom at the 6 o'clock, you should see some browning or some color changing. I've seen a lot of them that noted in the details of the sale that it was the original dial in hands, but they were puffy white like this with no caramelization or no patina change. And I'm sorry, I think people are not aware that there is another version of service dials other than the one that just says Swiss. The Swiss actually is the easiest to point out. You see Swiss on a vintage piece, and they're white and brand new and puffy looking like this with the hands like that. That's a Super Luminova. God, I can't even say that. Service dial and replacement hands. But the one that looks like the tritium is very misleading. The only way to tell is if it was a lot of the older tritium, if you take a blue light to it or a flashlight, a lot of them are dead. They won't even react in the dark. Or you'll get some older dials that you can take a blue light to, and the lume will be visible for maybe 30 seconds, and it'll drop off extremely fast to almost nothing after a minute or two. But if they're luminova or super luminova, which is almost a similar material, similar glow. If you put a light on it, either a blue light or a flashlight, a good flashlight on it for just a few seconds, you'll get glow for like hours. It'll fade, but slowly, as these do, just like a Seiko SKX 007. So keep that in mind when you're shopping vintage. Again, if you see white, puffy, brand new looking, I'd raise a question with that if the seller is saying that it's the original dial in hands. And even from the 70s, this model hardly changed at all. I mean, you'll see it with the newer bracelets on because it was a long production. I want to say it was from 59 production. The 1675 was from 1959. Let me think. 1959 to 1979 or 1980. And then, 1979 because 1980 was the 16750, which, the first early 81, 82, maybe 83 production years also had the non-indice applied painted luminescent material. And then around 84, they switched to the, what we have today with the white gold borders and then the filled lume. So also on those models, the hand stack is different. If you won't be able to see, well, maybe you can. If you look at it, the correct hand stack on these, and that's how you spot fakes, but some fakes are getting this correct, I should note also. So you can't really go off that. But the 24-hour hand goes on first. It is at the very bottom of nearest to the dial. On the 16750 that replaced this one in 1980, and I believe that's the Magnum watch. That's what Tom Selleck wore, was a 16750, an early production matte dial that had this matte dial and the applied indices, just painted on lume, which are actually more collectible than the later 16750 ones with the white gold borders. Go figure, right? That's what vintage is all about for some people. That's when we do tell the variances, because the case and all that looks pretty much similar, and it's going to have a Pepsi insert, and it's probably going to have an oyster. The original oyster for this one was a 7836, or what that was the folded oyster, or it could have a rivet, which I believe maybe this one had originally. And then there's a controversy of when these were starting to be fitted, or if Rolex actually fitted them in the early productions with a Jubilee. So you got varying opinions on that in the vintage forums. So it's interesting reads for people to prove their case on what is the standard. So, yep. Also, one more thing too is the jeweler, and it might be the dial feed, or it might just be the way the mechanism needs to be set up, or maybe some parts need to be replaced with the date set. There's that stutter again. So it's not, again, it's an old piece. It's not without it, but it is keeping good time. So might be my project watch during the winter here to do some work on it, get some consulting on it too. Yeah, I just wanted to do that review. If you have any questions, go ahead and post them in the comment section, and please subscribe. I would appreciate it. It helps motivate me to do more content. Thanks.